For this controller, we had a very simple, clear brief, and it was make the most comfortable controller ever. While it was simple, it was quite ambitious. All of the iterations that we did, we went through thousands and thousands of hours of gameplay to test that thesis and make sure we were headed in the right direction. We went back to 3 very key tenets of our design philosophy, and the first one is being human, having a human tone of voice and look and feel. Our second tenet is optimism. You can explain that as playful or quirky, but we wanted a really positive word that we can translate into physical form. So that level of simplicity was something that we wanted to come through in our designs. And then the third one was being daring. So daring to question the status quo. While we wanted to make sure that the controller was instantly familiar when you started playing and you could be successful with it as a tool as you were playing games, we also wanted to make sure we really went back to understanding truly what's needed from this controller. And you can see that from some of the prototypes. We literally went back to clay and wood and bending things and just starting from scratch, really. The best way to find that fine balance between something that pushes the envelope and something that is familiar is through iteration and prototyping. For every prototype that's on that table, there's probably 100 iterations of that same prototype. We call it like thinking in action versus trying to like just sit by yourself and like come up with the most brilliant idea. Is as you're playing with the object itself, that's how you can reach that result. And sometimes you have to run things in parallel, you have to make some really ugly things, you have to make some weird things, you have to make some beautiful things. Also, we even gave people kind of a form with clay on it and asked people to kind of hold it the way they wanted to hold it. That one specifically created a bunch of really bad designs, honestly. So on the table, you see a hammer, you see a knife, you even see a toothbrush there. And it seems a little random, but they all have one thing in common. They're tools. And that's where we found that original inspiration to think about how can we make something truly ergonomic and comfortable, but something that was flexible enough to fit a lot of different hands and also not look complicated. And then in parallel, we were developing these almost rigs to measure the right angles, little pins where to place the thumbsticks. Once we discovered some of these angles that made sense, we were able to start refining the curvature of the product. I realized we were onto something when people would pick it up and kind of start moving their hands around a little bit and rotate them and kind of find their grip. And with those kind of 2 very different lines of prototyping converging, that's when we started seeing this come to life. Of course, comfort was a key aspect of developing this controller, but it was also to create a controller that was uniquely Google. We have the Founders Edition, which is the midnight blue, and then we have Wasabi, which is this kind of hard to describe, light greenish, almost glowing color with lime colored thumbsticks. And then of course the clearly white, which really represents the simplicity of the controller. And it has this coral little thumbstick, and you might recognize it in some of our other Google products. We decided for all the interaction points to be this dark black for wear and tear, for simplicity, and then kind of really focus the color pop on the inside of this area, which is almost a little bit protected. And then for the main colors, we experimented with so many different options, and there's certainly some favorites that didn't make it. But at the end of the day, for the launch, we wanted to make sure we had 3 options. Especially impressed with the level of attention to detail that the team went through to get the buttons to feel clicky and robust and last over a long time, and through the abuse of someone literally throwing this into a wall. I'm so impressed by how the team were able to iterate to that point where you would hold this in your hand and you would trust that this is a tool that can be with you for many, many thousands of hours of gameplay. Designing a controller is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it takes time to do well. It's extremely nerve-wracking to come into a space new, and people have their favorite controllers since decades. But I think if you focus too much on what scares you, it's very hard to move forward. We were just so humbled and happy. We've been working on it for such a long time, and it's such a responsibility, and there's so much anxiety too to hear and see when people got their hands on it. They saw the level of care that had gone into it and loved the way it felt, the way it reacted, the way you could play with it. People were saying the things that we were trying to achieve, which is obviously incredibly exciting. If we can put a smile on someone's face when they pick up a product that we've designed, I think we've succeeded.